No, sir. We are live now.
So, Professor Mishra, whatever you said, please state it again. That's very, very important thing what you were saying. So, we're actually starting now, sir.
Okay, fine.
I'll just begin with it and. So good morning and welcome everyone. Our guests for today, Professor Girishwar Mishra, Professor Shyama Rath, Professor Sudha Vasan, Professor Ujjwal Kumar Singh, colleagues, and the participants. Welcome to this panel discussion on research and teaching in social sciences and humanities of the 2-week refresher course in social sciences and humanities organized by the Teaching Learning Center, Ramanujan College under the auspices of Ministry of Education's Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching. In these 2 weeks, we have seen different people coming together and discussing with us different aspects of their research, their interdisciplinarity emerging from their work. There have been discussions about how we can create inclusive spaces through alternative pedagogy, especially in the online mode. Today in this panel discussion, we come together to talk about these two important components, research and teaching, and what it entails, or what are the challenges, or rather how these two components of research and teaching shapes or kind of mold the life of an academician, scholar, or a teacher. For this session, we have been really privileged to have with us Professor Girishwar Mishra, our chair. Professor Mishra is a social scientist, psychologist, and Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya, Wardha, Maharashtra. He has also been associated with the University of Delhi as professor and head of Department Psychology and former Dean, Arts Faculty. During academic years spanning over 3 decades, he has taught at Gorakhpur, Allahabad, and Bhopal universities. He was a Fulbright Fellow at Swarthmore College, Philadelphia, and University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Professor Mishra's teaching and research area includes social psychology, human development, culture, and psychological knowledge. He has also been convener and president of National Academy of Psychology. Apart from the numerous publications and national and international journals, he has co-authored and edited many books, including Psychological Consequences of Prolonged Deprivation, Its Social Roots and Psychological Consequences, amongst others. Professor Mishra has also been the chief editor of the 5th ICSSR Survey of Psychology and editor of Psychological Studies, a journal of National Academy of Psychology, India. We are also glad to have with us Professor Shyama Rath join us as one of our panelists. Professor Rath is associated with Department of Physics and Astrophysics, University of Delhi. Her area of interest is in experimental condensed metaphysics, fabrication and characterization of semiconductor thin films, heterostructures, nanostructures, optical spectroscopy, metal oxide semiconductors, and other related fields. Having more than a decade of teaching experience and supervised a number of students for doctorate studies, Professor Rath has also been associated with different institutions for enhancing research. In 2018, she was associated with International Atomic Energy Agency as a consultant, and has also been and also has a number of research projects to her credit. Another panelist we have for today is Professor Sudha Vasan. Professor Sudha Vasan, a professor in sociology, University of Delhi. She teaches and writes on political ecology with a focus on issues of gender, caste, class, and Adivasi issues as they intersect with development, ecology, and environmentalism. She has regional interest in Himalaya with publication on socio-cultural, economic, and ecological change, cross-border trade, sacred nature, gender and natural resources, forest law, policy and institutions. Her book, Living with Diversity, Forestry Institutions in Western Himalaya, was published in 2007 by Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. The final panelist for today is Professor Ujjwal Kumar Singh, also the program director of this 2-week refresher course. Professor Singh, professor in the Department of Political Science, University of Delhi, obtained his master's degree from University of Delhi and doctorate from School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Earlier, he was a fellow at Center for Contemporary Studies, Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in Delhi. He is the author of books, Political Prisoners in India. He has also co-edited Towards Legal Literacy and Introduction to Law in India, and is the editor of book Human Rights and Peace, Ideas, Laws, Institutions and Movements. His co-authored book, The Election Commission of India, Institutionalizing Democratic Uncertainties, has been published by Oxford Publications in 2019. Needless to say, his articles appear in several national and international journals. He has also been a visiting fellow in universities of India and abroad, and has been and was the ICCCR Rajiv Gandhi Visiting Chair Professor in Contemporary Indian Studies at University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. So with this, it is a privilege, and on behalf of Teaching Learning Center, Ramanujan College, I welcome you all once again, the respected dignitaries, for today's discussion. And on this note, may I please invite the chair of this session, Professor Girishwar Mishra, to give his introductory remarks and take over the session. Professor Mishra.
Thank you, Shipra. I'm very happy to meet colleagues who are in different disciplines, and we expect that the diverse perspectives will help us to understand the complexities of teaching and research in social sciences and humanities. The scope of today's deliberation is to examine the trends, possibilities, interconnections between teaching and research in social sciences and humanities. Friends, today's meeting has a special context. The different disciplines are undergoing changes in terms of content, delivery, as well as concerns which are important at local as well as global levels. I understand that social sciences started in India in early 20th century, and early developments were largely related to the developments in European countries, and that scholarship provided one kind of model. Gradually, we have been trying to relate to our own context, and in that respect, a variety of changes have taken place. We have very limited time, and it is not possible to mention all those changes, but to a large extent, changes reflect certain degree of indigenization of the disciplines so that they are able to cope with the reality which has a very important connection with what has been going on in this subcontinent. We have one of the oldest civilizations, and there are many things which are continuing. There is also, if I use some expressions of sociologists, we have great traditions and we have little traditions. And there has been interaction between the two, and the interaction is still going on. The challenges that we have also reflections of the kind of political change that has taken place, even the geographical change that has taken place. We have seen how partition has influenced the whole scenario, and then subsequent developments are also well known to us. So we can't deny that that context is not going to shape what we do with our disciplines. So in some sense, there is a social conditioning, ecological conditioning of knowledge which has been growing. As far as teaching is concerned, there has been pressure to expand the teaching facilities, and the first three universities, Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras, which were established in 1857, they were merely examining bodies. Gradually teaching started, and we know what has happened after that. But today we have about 1,000 universities. We have 40,000 colleges. And the massive expansion that has taken place is creating problem, and it is also necessary. You can't deprive people. They have to be educated. But if you expand it without proper provision, the quality is compromised. We know many things about that, including plagiarism, as well as the quality of publication which is coming up, the kind of research which is being done in terms of, the program of PhD studies or doctoral programs. Many compromises have taken place. To a large extent, in many departments, it has become a kind of a ritual. So if you perform these things, then there is a degree. Now, creation of knowledge should be the main concern of research. To what extent we are able to achieve that, that is one very important challenge. Many things are very obvious, and we know what is happening. I remember that about 2-3 years back, UGC tried to take up a project to analyze the quality of PhD theses submitted in their different disciplines. I don't know what happened to that. But as a participant in the review process of projects, and also chief editor of psychology surveys undertaken by ICSSR, the 5th round and 6th round both, I have come across with the kind of developments that are taking place. And if you go through ICSR surveys, you will notice that there are certain pockets where good research work is available, but there is a lot of work which is very problematic. I would like to call it problematic, but if you decode it, you will see what are the various kinds of difficulties. I also like to refer that social sciences have tried to emulate physical sciences as their model. And in psychology, we often refer to physics envy, that you would like to make precise predictions, understand reality, explain it with the help of theories. But the nature of reality is not like the reality which is available in physical sciences. So positivism as a model has not worked well. We have now in social sciences a variety of perspectives. Most of us are familiar with that. There is no need to elaborate that point, but you have participative paradigms, you have feminism, you have so many things which are coming up. So these changes are a welcome addition, and they help us to understand reality better. But the difficulty with social sciences is that you are part of the process. You are studying human beings. You are studying behavior of human beings, products, relationships. So subjectivity becomes a major issue. And recent developments in qualitative methods have tried to help us to use subjectivity as a strength, not as a problem. It may require more time to elaborate on the issue of paradigm and the different changes that are taking place and the issues which are there. I hope other colleagues will also try to link with these issues. As far as teaching is concerned, the model that we have been following, as has been pointed out by many of us, that the whole model is largely related to rote learning and testing that memory. So transfer of learning is more important. So repetition becomes very important. reproduction becomes very important. The scholarship is tested with that. Now this whole scenario of teaching becomes, a process which goes in some way against the process of knowledge creation. And unfortunately, there is some kind of identity crisis in the disciplines, as well as the processes which are there in our teaching scenario. We need to see how the two are linked and how we can create a kind of synergy between the two, so that teaching becomes more actively related to research process. That has not been the case in many of the social sciences. I have not mentioned much about humanities. I don't see anyone more related to humanities in the panel. Humanities is a broader area. You have literary studies and all that. They have their issues. And if you look at their scenarios and their concerns, you'll notice that they are more descriptive, interpretive kind of approach that they are following. The texts are edited, analyzed, compared. But again, as a vice chancellor of one university where language and literature was a very prominent area, I came across the kind of issues which are there. I understand that the creativity is lagging there. While creativity is very important component of literature, but the researchers, they try to emulate what is happening in social sciences, and there are many problems there. I hope that the panelists, which are very senior colleagues and represent different disciplines, will help us to raise the questions and also help us to understand the context in those questions have to be looked at. So how the quality and quantity has to be, matched, what can be done, what changes are required in our teaching practice. I think that is one very important concern. We have a great concern that we don't have world-class universities. Our education system is lagging behind. We want to improve upon that. So with these initial comments, I invite Professor Sudha Vasan to share her concerns and raise issues pertaining to teaching and research. Professor Vasan.
Thank you so much, Professor Mishra. I think I will, talk about many of the things that you've already shared. I think those are very important points, and I'll try and reflect on them as a sociologist, right, coming from my discipline. But the way I thought I'd talk about this is first talk about the general in terms of teaching and how we look at it, and from the sociological perspective and the particular requirements of sociological research. So that is what I thought I will add to this panel. So to begin with, I think the first thing that perhaps all of us know, but we should reiterate, is the nature of teaching in higher education as compared to teaching. And there, I think it's very important to re-emphasize, even structurally for our universities, that teaching is not, at this level, is not the delivery of information. So what we are doing as teachers of sociology is really trying to teach students how to ask questions in the discipline, and of course, how to go about answering them. In that sense, research is really core material for us, not as information. So we do use research that other people have done, but we are not providing it to our students simply as information for them to learn and emulate. As I think Professor Mishra also said, our research cannot be simply emulation, whether of the European tradition or even traditions that are there even within our context. Instead, I think teaching itself, we need to recognize, is simply we are using the research of others to teach our students how to raise questions and to understand how other researchers have gone about answering that question. So, really, research question and method is what we are teaching from the syllabus material that we have. Um, from this perspective, then, a teacher being a researcher becomes almost essential to the teaching of sociology, because for a teacher to first understand the nature of this material, I think becomes very, very critical. In sociology in particular, I think this is important because what we are studying, the nature of the object of our study, again referring back to, I think, Professor Mishra's wise words, what we are looking at in the social sciences cannot be an emulation of what is there in the sciences or, the positivist tradition. And in that sense, the nature of the object we are studying in sociology is very, very distinct. It is actually contemporary society, which is a very dynamic thing. It's very contextual. And in some sense, this has to be part of the classroom. There are several ways this becomes part of the classroom. One, of course, research done by other scholars. But the other, I think, that's important is for the teacher in the classroom to reflect on what are the research questions that are essential for understanding contemporary society. I think that is an essential aspect of sociology itself. Again, how we can do it given our context, given all the constraints that I'll talk about in a minute, I think is a huge challenge in front of us. But I simply wanted to underline that the material we use as syllabi is material that is raw material for us in the classroom rather than something that we expect students to sort of reproduce or emulate. The second kind of thing that I wanted to underline, again, a general point before I go on to look at, the specifics of, what is our own system and the challenges we face there. I think is the idea that the purpose of higher education is also for creating future members of a particular discipline. So, if we think about research in India or research in sociology in India in the next 20 years, that is dependent on the nature of the classroom today. Because tomorrow's research community, the sociological community in India, is actually produced, I think, in our teaching today. Just as I think all of us today who are researchers here were produced by our teachers. Produced in the sense not of emulation again, but produced in the sense of our understanding of what is research and what is method really came from that classroom. So, in that sense, I think in sociology, definitely the kind of separation between research and teaching, I think, is a very risky proposition. And I think all of us are here because we think there should be some kind of synergy integration between them. The other point that I wanted to add from a disciplinary perspective, for sociology, again, apart from the object that we study, right? The other reason I think research and the quality of research is so important is because of the methods that are specific or unique to our discipline, right? So, for instance, a method like ethnography, uh, the researcher itself, the researcher himself or herself or themselves, is the instrument of study. So, unlike the sciences or unlike the sciences particularly, where you might have refining of instruments, the refining of the research instrument is something that can happen only in a classroom. Because for ethnography, it's the researcher who is the instrument, apart from being the agent of research itself. And here again, I think ethnography is learned only by doing. So for a teacher, needs to be constantly learning it before they are actually able to, teach and create the next generation of researchers. From here, what I'd like to do is actually look at some of the challenges we face in our very particular context, right? I mean, I think again, Professor Mishra painted that picture for us where we have a very large number of universities. We also have a very large number of students. And our specific conditions of the classroom are very, very different from, let's say, a classroom in America, or, when we talk about world-class universities, our conditions are also very specific, and we need to work within those conditions to create or compete with the world. And I think a couple of things that I think would be useful to emphasize for us is to think about our higher education institutions as not being primarily degree granting institutions. I think that is a challenge that we constantly face, given the context that we are in and given the large numbers. The degree granting function of institutions, of universities, is very, very large. And the emphasis is often on that, and we can see that in the emphasis we place on examinations, right? Because degrees depend on good examinations, and the examination focus, I think, comes from the kind of emphasis on degree granting. And I think for higher education, at least, we really have to think about the quality of training in critical thinking, which I really think, at least in a discipline like sociology, it's very difficult to reflect in an examination system. So it does get reflected really in the quality of research. And that is a challenge that I think Professor Mishra has already placed before us. The second kind of, I think, structural institutional change that we really need to think about in terms of thinking of our universities is moving away from a prioritization of publications over teaching. I think often we frame this question of whether research is prioritized or teaching is prioritized. I think the perspective that, at least coming from my discipline, I think what we need to think about more carefully is that the challenge is really not between, or not whether we prioritize research or teaching, but really whether we prioritize publications or research, right? Because research and teaching go together, but publications may not be the appropriate criteria, or the only criteria, at least. I don't know about appropriate, we can discuss that. But I would like to throw that as an idea to discuss, that we really need to think about research as being broader than publications. Because research, after all, is integrated to teaching, whereas publications may not always be integrated to teaching the way I spoke about it in the last 5 minutes. The third sort of idea that I want to present with you is the kind of balance we need to create between research and teaching time in a university. Right? I think in terms of practice, a major challenge for many of us in the social sciences and social science like sociology that's dependent on field research. Right? One, we are dependent on field research, so it cannot be done inside a closed room. And the second, of course, since our object is dynamic, we are studying society as it happens. So we really need to be doing research when things are happening in society. So that creates a particular kind of challenge for sociologists as a community, I think, where we really need to think of the planning or a balance between research and teaching time. Here again, I want to point out, I think in theory and in structure, the way our institutions were imagined, I think was done with wisdom. So a lot of time, for instance, things that are often thought of simply as semester breaks or vacations are, I think, for researchers, very, very crucial time to actually balance the research and teaching commitment or the work that we have as professionals. So I think professional development, developing the body of professional sociologists, we really need to remember that the breaks in teaching are also work time in terms of research. I think that is something that all of us need to keep reminding ourselves. The challenge, or at least for future in terms of planning, I think one of the things we need to think about is, of course, that this balance between research and teaching, right, actually requires planning, and very careful planning at the level of individual teachers. So each of us need to be planning our time in terms of finding time for research amidst teaching, and also having a commitment to teaching. But I also think it is at the medium and the higher levels of structuring of university. And one of the challenges, I think, that all of us, at least among sociologists, we do discuss is the fact that ad hocism can be a real killer of research and research quality. Right? Because research is something that requires commitment and commitment of time, and that needs to be built into both our university structures as well as our personal time. And I think that is a particular challenge in the Indian context that we do need to address. For instance, universities do have time, but over time we need to be able to provide sort of plans for the next year or two, both for research and for teaching. So that is a challenge that I'd like to, really come back to if all of us can, in terms of how we can create structures that encourage research, right? People who are committed to both research and teaching to undertake it. The fourth kind of issue, again, as a challenge, I want to put it up here, is the issue of research grants and money for research. In the kind of Indian context, right? And for sociology, again, I'll talk only about sociology because I think there are particular characteristics to the kind of research we do. I think the primary constraint is not always the quantum of money. That is important too. I mean, we are a developing country, and there is the issue of distribution of resources for research and things like that. But I think one of the long-term challenges we need to think about is the nature of research funding itself. That needs to be, I think, it cannot be similar to the ones in Europe or America, or what is appropriate for University of Delhi may not be appropriate for our regional universities. So we really need to think of research funding and how that can be tailored to the nature of our classroom, of our universities. For instance, a large proportion, so research grants and funding also often follow the science model, right? So there's an idea of a large proportion of the funding being restricted to purchase of immovable assets or large equipment and things like that. And as I just mentioned, the major equipment for sociologists is the self, right? Or field assistants and things like that. So that kind of imagination of research funding and research time, I think, is needed both at the university structural level for us to think about, but also it becomes very, very important at the individual level. And here I want to bring in the issue of gender and caste and social location of the diversity of teachers in our universities. And perhaps a big one is also regional, because there is disparity in how research time and research funding between, let's say, departments and colleges, between different colleges, between Delhi and non-Delhi. I think that's a big one many of our teachers often are aware of and will raise. I think we need to rationalize these, think about the kind of time and money being available for quality research irrespective of social location. And of course, social locations becomes important in terms of the individual finding time and resources as well for research. So what I just did was talk about the kind of challenges and constraints that are specific, right, to sociologists and to India in our context. I don't want to end there, so I'll just take a couple of minutes more, where I want to focus on how and why faculty who do research do manage to do it in spite of these constraints. So I mean, in a wide sense, I agree with Professor Mishra that there is a crisis in terms of quality of research and the quality of world-class research community that we need to develop. It's something that we need to work on. But I also want to end by looking at the bright spots that actually are there. I mean, in a discipline like sociology, for instance, there are, I think, very important interventions that have been made by sociologists located in India, right, who've contributed both to the sociology of India, but also contributed to sociology in general. And I really want to emphasize that also because we are looking, we're also, I think, amongst us, we're also talking to a community of future researchers, people who are beginning their research career. I think it's important that while we discuss these structural constraints that I've spent time talking about, I think it's also important to recognize that people do very good research within these constraints in spite of them. And I think that I just want to list a couple of reasons why and how. And I think the first one that I want to emphasize is really what makes us a part of the discipline, the community, which is a global abstract community of sociologists, is really the research we do. So in that sense, for me, to be a sociologist, you cannot not do research, right? The rest of it can be a job, it can be mechanical, but research becomes essential to be a sociologist. And teachers, of course, continue to use their personal time and personal resources for professional research. And that is something that we see all the time in sociology. But the last that I want to end with is really this last year and a half that has been a terrible time for all of us, right? Where we had, very difficult times. But what has emerged out of this in sociology, what we're seeing, what is emerging, not just emerged, what is emerging out of it are also new adaptations in research and teaching in sociology. And I think for us to move forward from India, in India as well, we need to look at these innovations and start thinking about, thinking about them carefully as well. One, of course, that all of us are aware of is the use of technology, new technology, but as well as old technology has been used in creative ways, not just for meetings like this or online teaching, but also for research. This doesn't mean it replaces older methodologies, but I think there are new methodological innovations that are happening, some of it in India as well, where people are looking at phone conversation, WhatsApp chats, and things like that as additional data, not a replacement, and thinking of what this implies for research about society. So I want to end with that silver lining. I mean, a lot of what I said are about challenges and things we need to discuss. But I think there are bright spots which we also need to build on and which we can build on. So let me leave it at that. Look forward to listening to, I think, all the others who come after me as well, and take up the discussion. Thank you, Dr. Mishra.
Thank you, Professor Vasan.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to see the struggle living under these conditions and making efforts to move forward. And I'm sure that this is the spirit which really matters in shaping the discipline. And an important point that you have made is that today's students are future researchers. You create the community of scholars, and I think the structural challenges which are there, they need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the kind of challenge that social scientists face is that reality is changing, it's dynamic, and you are a participant and you are also an observer. So that makes a real crucial difference when we compare with people in physical sciences in other areas. So I think with this interesting and very useful input, we move forward to Professor Shyama Rath. She's going to represent a perspective of a physical scientist and having an eye on society and social sciences. May I request Professor Rath?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mishra. And to begin with, I really don't know what to add after Professor Mishra and what Professor Vasan have. I think they've already covered everything. But my training, as you said, is in an entirely different field and possibly very far removed from the theme of this event. But then I also think that probably I'll try and bring in a different perspective. And if you allow me, can I share my screen? Because
Yes,
like
ma'am.
that, I'm from the physical sciences, so I like to give data. So for me, and
Sure.
also, if
You are
you
welcome.
don't mind, I would like to share my screen.
Yes, I've made you the co-host. You may share the screen.
Just 1 minute, yeah, okay. And but then, like while my, let me see. Is it okay?
It hasn't been shared as of now. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yes, we
can you see it now? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So I will be more, of course, I'm from the physics department and it's all quantitative. Well, not all, but I will also explain like why even our systems are problematic and we also deal with dynamic systems. But other than that, I think I will speak more from the point of view of some data analysis I've done as part of the university IQSC team. And that is what I will be speaking about mostly. And I think to begin with, Professor Mishra has touched upon some very, very sensitive points. And for example, are we going to teach this constant conflict between teaching the masses or the classes? All of us have heard on several forums, oh, why can't you be a Harvard or a Princeton? And so I think people have forgotten the reality as to why our universities are completely different. The type of challenges that we face are different than what Professor Vasan said about advocism. Professor Mishra talked about quality of publications, research, plagiarism. These are all issues which are important. So before I now I don't know. So unfortunately, whether we like it or not, our research is always measured by some a third party, and one of the indicators or by which our research impact is studied is through the global ranking systems, and one of them is the QS system, where if you look at the table, uh, 20% of it goes towards citations per faculty. And that is what is linked to the way we do our research. And also that impacts the academic peer review, which has a lot of weightage, which is 40%. And if I see where Delhi University stands, say maybe now our QS ranking is 500 plus, and the Harvards and the Princetons obviously in single digits. So why is it that we need to understand this table? And that is because it's at different levels. There's all of us know the challenges that we have in faculty recruitment. So that is something which I will not talk about at all. But rather, I would like to see as to what is within our hands. And that is the academic reputation and the citations per faculty. So before I see what our responsibilities are, now I just want to do a comparison with other Indian institutions, I should write here, not universities. And one may ask as to where. So the first row is Delhi University. And let me look at only the citations per faculty and the academic reputation. If I see here, we are quite good as compared to the other institutional national institutes as far as the academic reputation is concerned. But citations, so we have to understand why is it that this is different. Is it because this is not a correct comparison? All the other institutions are specialized institutions, they're engineering and science dominated. So is that, and we are span spectrum of disciplines. So what is it that we need to understand for about ourselves is, and like Professor Vasan correctly put it, is publication the only criteria of research output? So while I look at QS, so is that we must look at whether one size fits all, and what is it that we are doing right or not. So if we see a research impact, so now again going by the QS system, it is almost all the impact is judged by our publications, the H index of the relevant subject, and this database QS derives from Scopus, which we feel is probably the most comprehensive database. And the other assessment of our research impact is our academic reputation. So this is where I think Professor Mishra, Professor Vasan have talked about the first point at least. We need to develop. So what is our responsibility and the youngsters? Because this event is directed more for youngsters. What is our responsibility. And that is, I think, first thing is we developed a research culture very early on in our careers. And for those of us who are established to a certain level, just like we got a very good guidance, it is our responsibility that the younger generation gets that kind of thing. Then you have to keep finding what inspires and challenges you. Keep reading, enhance your professional visibility. Look at what works for other institutions, what works for your peers. And the sense of complacency, I really feel, all of us need to be very caution ourselves against, कि permanent ho gaye, so it's all right. We should not work only towards our promotions if you really want to be a good researcher. Then aim to publish, although you, like Professor Vasan said, it may not be related, but then having goals is very important. And that is where you must aim to publish. And yes, one will come across a lot of rejections, you will have adverse referee reports, but then you have to work around these. So I'm now going to just run through, I've picked up some disciplines in the social sciences and humanities as to how the publications look like. So if I look at this Scopus data publications from Delhi University, and so while the sciences, yes, have a large number, and we will come to that as to why they have more, but then we also look at some of the disciplines. So other than the non-science disciplines, we have about 24% publications in the humanities and social sciences. And if we look at the university, our university rankings, both in arts and the natural sciences, uh, we stand it's mixed. So among about 500 universities, we are around 200, in both the arts and humanities as well as the sciences here, 284. So now I'll pick up a few departments and look at how we fare. So worldwide, 327 institutions were graded, and our sociology department ranks among the top 30%. Our history department here is again in the top 50%. So this will give us some idea about our economics department is in the top 25% or 20%. It has a high rank of 128. Now, these are not just numbers, but data always helps us analyze. Then we have our philosophy department, which is again top 50. Here I've the numbers which are against the disciplines are the number of institutions worldwide which were ranked, and this is our university ranking mentioned here. And in some, I have also mentioned some of the other national universities, because before we go global, we must understand where we stand compared to our peers in the national level. Then this is the linguistics department, where we are again top 50%. And this is for English, modern languages. This data is available. I don't need to really go through the numbers, but the important point which I want to talk about is, now this was accounting and finance, where we are okay. We stand on par with some of the other institutions, but there are some other interesting factors. Now, if I look at from the social sciences, if I move to the sciences, I've picked up physics, which is my department. 604 universities were ranked, and we stand here between 201 and 250. So, which I don't think we should be pessimistic about, considering that we have very different kinds of challenges. And here, if I compare with the national institutes, these are all specialized institutions with far more funding. These are residential campus, so researchers can walk into the labs anytime. And we unfortunately have, unlike maybe what some of my colleagues in the social sciences might think, we have a different set of challenges. For example, what happened during the lockdowns? we could not access any of our equipment. Then science, when we go to publish a paper, we need repeatability. Repeatability is very important. So, like Professor Vasan and Professor Mishra talked about dynamic systems, because we are dealing with human beings. Scientists also, when we are dealing with materials, we have different kind of dynamic system which are affected by humidity, by temperature. So those are the kind of and we need, science is expensive, so that's another issue. So our universities, whether we might have ideas, our ideas might be on par with some of the best in the world, but do we have the means to experiment our ideas? So those are some issues, and here I have also mentioned for some of the other disciplines. So now so what I would like to open the house issues that some of the streams face in publishing. Like, I know that we have some excellent faculty in these departments which I have listed, and they have very good employability. But what is it that the issue now? The reason I'm talking so much about publishing is because I am happen to handle IQAC, where we need to look at this aspect. So probably my esteemed colleagues can discuss this and what are the challenges they face. Now, for example, our FMS is a very reputed university, but why does it not feature in the rankings, whereas several IIMs and IITs do? Again, we have very large law department. Why do we not feature in the ranking? So these are some of the things I want to open up the house for discussions too. And finally, I think all this is related, and we need to understand and do a SWOT analysis. I think I can think of my discipline, and I'm sure that all of you, it's already mentioned, and some of you have already done similar um, studies or similar analysis for your departments. And the reason it's important to do this, so that we know how to proceed. So we have, like, for my department, I think we have a strong research profile, and our strength is also that we have a large number of PhD students. We also have large number of collaborations which help us in our publications and in enhancing the number. And we also have some laboratories in the vicinity which like to collaborate with us. But then we have, our challenges are, as all of you know, that the number of students is expanding rapidly. Ever since I joined, for example, from 2005 to now, the student strength has increased from 100, intake was 180 to now it's almost 400 for the first year, MSc previous. But our faculty strength has gone down, and in any case, for sanctioned number of posts is around 85. We have only about 35 faculty working. Then we have other issues like, as I said, science is expensive. We do not have access to very basic research facilities, and a lot of our rejections papers are rejected because of very fundamental measurements which we do not have access to. And that is what our challenges and weaknesses are. This is not, I mean, I can imagine, I cannot see what's written here, so I'm sure even you can't, but basically it is to tell the young audience that one must be aware about all the learning resources that you have, e-content, library resources. Actually, there's a lot available. There are a lot of ICT initiatives of MHRD, and then we have our own library resources, which will really aid you in your research. And I think with that, I will stop, and maybe I'll throw some points here for discussion. But important thing is, like what Professor Vasan said, that we must understand that one size does not fit all. And aping any other discipline is also not the way forward. Oh, physics has done this, so if I do this, then I'll also do well. No. So we have to look at what is the model which works best for us. And then again, about our education system, we keep hearing about rote learning, but let's also look at what is positive in our system and what is not. And I'll close with one very important point, which is across all disciplines. I think the writing skills, our students, our PhD students are not investing enough in learning writing skills and methodologies, research methodologies, doing correct literature survey. I think so. These are the things we could think of, some course which cuts across disciplines where uh, they learn, where the interdisciplinarity the works and people are exposed to the correct writing skills. So I think I'll stop with this. Yeah. Thank you.
Professor Mishra, I request you to kindly unmute yourself. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rath. We have data about the existing scenario in the university, and the SWOT analysis tells about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and what can be done. It's very interesting to see that Delhi University, which has quite long history, and as you have indicated that out of 85 faculty members, you have only 35.
That's
I mean,
correct.
that's a big challenge, you know, and that has grown gradually over years, that the faculty positions are not filled because of one reason or the other.
So
And
this
that has
immediately
created,
translates actually
yeah,
into
it's a major
ranking
challenge.
and reputation. Yes.
And I'm sure that the uh, government will look into it, and we request authorities to take care of this. Obviously, there is variation across different disciplines, and their participation in the world ranking shows considerable variety. And of course, you have shared limited data, but if you look at the whole scenario, the situation is not very, comforting. You need to work on several fronts, enriching the departments uh, through recruitment of faculty, creating infrastructure. That is one major requirement, and I think it's quite well known, and the situation is alarming. I'm sure that this needs attention, serious attention, and it's a problem which requires urgent attention. Thank you very much.
But
May I
what's more
request?
important, I
Yeah.
think we should understand as to, since this is focused on humanities and social sciences, and Professor Vasan brought out this very important point about, publication not being the only output of research. So I think we really need to understand that, because this discussion I've had with Professor Ujjwal Singh also several times. He tells me science में बहुत publications हो जाते हैं, and so I think we really need to understand this for the benefit of one another.
I understand that publication is vital in the sense that your existence, your contribution has to be communicated. Unless people understand what you are doing, knowledge will remain somewhere. It will not be integrated in the mainstream. You need to put your ideas. It should be shared. And one of the important requirements of science is that it should be in the public domain. It should be accessible. It should be made available to people, to policymakers, to everyone. So while the publication is a game, all of us know the complexities of that and what has happened in recent years. Mushrooming of journals, every nook and corner, everywhere, this or that kind of journal is being published. And I don't know how they put the impact factor. A journal from any place and what they do, I don't understand how they do it.
I'm glad you brought this up because we need to understand this. We have overnight impact factors and overnight biases in numbers.
Yes. All this is happening. So what is the value of that? That's a big question. You need to have some kind of quality control. I understand that there have been very good teachers and many of great scientists had no PhD. I mean, research is not necessary and many people have done good work. They have been good teachers. So what is the link between the two? There should be a possibility. One may be a very good teacher, excellent teacher, and he should be respected and the dignity should be there for that person also. It's not necessary that everybody should publish. So, and what kind of publication? And we have not given much space to debate the kind of criteria of ranking which we have to use. We need to talk about that also in our own context. You are completing, all the departments and universities of India in the last several years are just trying to complete the requirements of NAC. So a lot of resources have gone to that. Leaving research, leaving teaching. All teachers and colleges, departments are required to complete that data. It may be fake, but the data should be there. I don't understand what kind of qualitative change is going to take place. Anyway, that's not the point to be discussed right now. But the criteria need to be looked at. What is the effective, useful criteria in our context for ranking and to provide input for creating a good institution? Okay, thank you very much for pointing out this issue. Now I request Dr. Shukla if he is available. Dr. Ashish.
Sir, he is not a panelist. He is one of the coordinators. Yes.
I think
Professor Singh.
Yeah, it's time to listen to our senior colleague, Professor Singh, who has experience of learning, teaching, and doing research in Europe, in India, and having a very close connection with the scenario at what we call ground reality and the context in which we are living. Professor Singh, would like to be benefited by your observations.
Thank you so much, Professor Mishra. I'm nothing in front of you and my colleague. I know my limitations, but being so generous, and thank you, Shipra, for putting me in this panel. As we have probably very, very few minutes left, sir, so I'll have probably 5 to 6 minutes only. Then probably participants may come in. And I'll start with, thing which was saying before it was recorded, and that was foundational principles we brought in, especially for entire humanities and social sciences. You so well you put the whole idea that in 20s and 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, bulk of universities in India emulated what Europeans had set up. And over the years, we have realized, and rightly so, that we need to disrupt that framework, bring new frameworks which are in tune with the time and also with the culture and values. And that's probably one of the most important things which we need to do in research and teaching as such. And Another foundational principle which Professor Vasan also brought in, the whole purpose of education, not rote learning, but entire purpose of education is to build up a non-hierarchical society. It's the wisdom which is coming from all cultures, that through knowledge we learn, and we actually give up hierarchies, and inequalities. Now it may be utopian, but we live by those values of equality and justice and liberty. To what extent our ecosystem give this kind of value is important. Also, I take Professor Vasan's concern about publications in this manner, that there's so few journals which we can cite. And I remember even 20-30 years back, we used to cite Contribution to Indian Sociology, Indian Economic Social History Review, none from political science, Economic Political Weekly, but none from political science. And that's, thing remains. In political science, we won't find, that kind of journal, which is in sociology or probably psychology, economics. This is the story within social sciences. So it's that ecosystem where actually it's not going to come from top. It's not that, Sage and Oxford are going to suddenly come with a journal. It's about cities and the ecosystem there, where concerned scholars think about it, plan it, frame it, because country needs hundreds of reputed journals, fine, which actually offer global standard. And that's what probably we were lacking over here. So having said that, let me bring to the contemporary. Pandemic time since last year has opened up huge possibilities. It's terrible times, it's time of crisis, but we all know that times of crisis produces something new. It is in these times there's renewed debate about globalization. On what terms globalization, and that we have seen in terms of when vaccine issue came up, who produces, who appropriates, who distributes, as such. So many of the older debates came back to this, but that opened up two kind of questions which I could present before this eminent panel. One was this whole attraction towards science giving us all answer is suddenly opened up, because millions have died all over the world. It's not that science preempted or came with easy answers. Even now, probably there is understanding among wider scientific community that it's so difficult to understand this phenomena and how to tackle that. We have seen, in fact, all participants here know that WHO standards changed. The medicine which we're getting, they completely changed. Some medicines were seen as obsolete. They never worked as such, which makes us to think that our complete worship of science, there is some problem over there. There's a tremendous tension over there. I'm not questioning the entire notion of science. All I'm saying is the uncertainties are there in sciences, uncertainties are there in human life. So we actually, social science, humanities and sciences, carry a certain kind of foundational rock where uncertainties prevail. So any subdiscipline, any area which claim that they have the final answer is completely opened up with pandemic. It's even for common sense, it's completely opened up, which helps us to really go back, look at foundations and strengthen that. Fine, because what we in political science do is, when we talk of democracy as a political system, as a political community, which is most sought after form of government all over the world, it rests on the principle that though you may have procedural certainty, which is must, election rules have to be certain, rules of the game have to be certain, they have to be told beforehand, but the outcomes are uncertain. If you actually can say that an outcome will be this and this, which used to happen in say Soviet Union, that outcome was virtually fixed, that 99% vote going to Communist Party of Soviet Union. Fine. That can't happen. So outcome has to be uncertain. If we take lesson from this principle of democracy, that procedural certainty will lead to uncertainty in terms of outcome, any party come into power. If you apply the same principle to social sciences, all research rests on the principle of uncertainty. You don't know the outcome. So the challenge is, and Professor Rath pointed out, that we may send an article, it may be refused. In fact, probably the best journals would take only 2%, 3% of the submissions, and this would be sent for review, resubmission or rejection. So why should we shy away from that? And that's what we do. Most of us are really shy of that, we need to learn. We may be not accepted, we have to go back, and that's for larger audience, that it's knowledge outcome is a very, very difficult process. It's not easy that you write something and it gets published somewhere there, and that probably as a community we have to learn. The uncertainty which pandemic brought before us was also interesting in a way, that the way we have started taking technology seriously. And it's not left to just engineering and to the computer sciences. It's actually now for all of us, the way we interact. So my colleague from JNU, Professor Manin Thakur, in one of the lectures to the participants said over here, that they are involved in a creation of knowledge bank, where like this, in this mode, in online mode, you're free to organize something, you record it, and make it open access. Same thing Professor Lawrence Liang said in his first lecture to participants over here, that many of these online sites, LibGen, Sci-Hub, they are seen as disruptor to organized publishing, but they have opened up numerous spaces for researchers all over the world, that you can immediately go to the article and books and then go through that and produce something new, do some field work as such. So technology has been disruptive, which I think is enabling for researchers, for fellow academicians, that they have huge access and they can actually create knowledge bank in different zones of culture as such. So I focus upon uncertainty, which otherwise seen as a value of disruptor, but in social science, humanities, like in sciences, it plays an important role. Also the role of technology, which brings in terms of disruption, but uneasiness, because even with new technology, the big data carry certain biases. They carry, American or Eurocentric biases. Say, for example, in USA, you have this study where AI, artificial intelligence, the way they have worked, it has excluded minorities over there, the colored Americans over there. So even with what we see as something objective, big data, we need to probe it and see whether it actually adapts to different cultures or not. Face recognition, which is much used over here, that we have to really. But sir, what you brought earlier in terms of foundational, the 1920s and 30s, and probably not 20th century, even late 19th century, the framework of knowledge which was established in Europe and which actually went all over the world, we have started rethinking. And probably important thing would be in terms of primacy of language, which new education policy does. What we have is we have rules, we have programs, but we mess up in terms of implementation, because we really do not provide that kind of space. So all Indian languages, if we have spaces, you will come across hundreds of researchers who would say, I'm very good in Punjabi, I'm very good in Hindi, but when it comes to outcome, we have to produce it in English. And then our spirit, our passion, our romance goes over there. That can't be translated into words. So we need to have as many good journals, fine? We need to develop that, so that researchers across the country in different languages with different cultures will have a space. You can't have the same thing. But let me disrupt it to the whole thing. We cannot escape the global framework, sir. We have to be part of it, fine? It's not just imposition from somewhere, because whether we like it or not, we want knowledge to produce a non-hierarchical society, but we live in a hierarchical world. So there are Harvards and Princetons. It's not because what they have done, because the milieu which they have established, the relaxed atmosphere which they established, the facilities which they have given. I think in our country, we have more such facilities for academics, for universities, for research centers, which it seems we are not having it. Then we are nowhere. We don't want to bring another Shanghai or another Harvard over here, but we do have the capacity, intellectual capacity to produce. The thing which my colleagues also pointed out, to prepare that milieu in this very uneven, very unequal society, where different kind of scholarship may be given recognition. I'll rest my case, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Singh. I'm sure that all of us have learned a lot about the issues which are critical to the development of an authentic, relevant, and applied social science in Indian context. So over to Shipra.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to all the panelists for the intervention which they made. And thank you so much, Professor Mishra, for, for your interventions and for all the remarks and reflections on the system of research and teaching together. We do have a couple of questions from the participants. There are two general questions from the participants, and then there are specific questions to particular panelists. So I will first take up the two generic questions, and you all may answer it as you please. So one of the participants, Dr. Mahinder Ramraj Mishra, he asked, does research and teaching goes together in college as compared to university? And Mr. Shahul Hamid, he asked that according to his observation, the perspective on combining teaching and research in Indian academic institutions is not efficient as compared to other countries. So he, requests your reflections on this observation. So if we would like to begin with these two first.
How much time we have?
So we can take another 15, 20 minutes and...
May I request Professor Sudha Vasan? She has talked about the synergy between teaching and research. I think she can elaborate this issue.
Yeah, I see. I think the question can be interpreted in a couple of ways, right? One is what exists. And that has been discussed in society. We already have changes in API systems and things like that, where it was revised, to make that difference between university and, the department and colleges. But to answer more directly to the participant, I think in terms of each of us as individuals in this profession, I think it's important for our growth that it remains connected. Right, one is promotion criteria and things like that. There I think I would lean towards making it as flexible as possible. But I think all our students and all our teachers should have that opportunity, because I said to be a sociologist as a professional, right, it's a global abstract community. I think the two cannot be separated. And given that our undergraduate students also, for instance, they are the material that's going to become researchers tomorrow, I'm presenting to you, or I'm placing before you, that it should be connected. And it's not so much about efficiency. I just want to add one more point. I'm sorry to take up more time. I know there's less. I think there's an issue of incubation period, which perhaps I want to add to the things that we've said. Research is something that brews and improves and emerges as a product over time. So in that sense, I think both for teachers good and for students, I think the two should remain connected, even though at times it might be inefficient given the numbers of students our college classrooms our college teachers deal with. So I'm not answering your efficiency question. I'm agreeing that a lot of times it's inefficient, but I think for long term, for our research community, the two should not be separated. Yeah, that's a position I would take. I'd leave it to Professor Mishra to comment on it.
Shipra?
Yes. So the next question is specifically to Professor Sudhavasan. Mr. Kulandai, he is asking how to combine the workload of a professor in college with universities as equal weightage is given to the criteria of NAC and NIRF. So yes.
Yeah, see what you're asking, I presented as a challenge that remains, right? So as I just said in response to the previous question as well, yes, in terms of API points and in terms of these calculations for promotions and stuff, I think we do need to be more flexible and liberal and allow teachers to make that choice, because workload is an issue. But I think in terms of long term, in terms of what we want for the long term, I think that balance needs to be built in, and this is going to be built in many, many ways. One of the ways in which all of us have spoken about it is, of course, the idea of really reducing ad hocism, right? Because really, the way I think other universities across the world deal with it is having a plan for the next 5 years in terms of teaching load. So it's possible then for some teachers to get time off at different times without affecting the student body and without affecting teachers. So in our system we already have this idea. In theory we have the idea of research leave and PhD leave and all that, but given that we also have ad hocism, we haven't had recruitments, we have so few teachers, we're involved with non-teaching work. Because of all of that, I think there's a crisis in the way we are able to deal with it. But in theory it can be done, and I think that should be our objective, that that workload distribution needs to be thought of over the long term, because research is something I think that needs that incubation period, so different teachers are able to deal with workload, not in terms of every semester but in terms of a slightly longer period of time. I hope that answers the question. Of if not, please do ask again. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Mishra, I immediately responded without waiting for your permission, but please, I will. Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Vasan. The next question is for Professor Shyamarat. The participant asked what QS rankings is playing a quality role, while many of the colleges, and especially arts and science colleges, even do not have enough infrastructure. So how do we, see this difference, huge gap when we talk about quality? If you would like to comment on this.
Yeah, there's no denying it's not just in colleges. I mean, we've talked about the infrastructure issues everywhere. But having said that, I mean, it is not that the departments are very well equipped, to be honest. And departments also have a very large teaching load. Number of students, I can speak for my department that we have around about 750 master's students, and we have to do our research, we have administrative responsibilities, so all that is there. But I'll tell you, when I have to be honest to myself, I have to somehow think that no, I cannot give excuses. I will have to work, I have to do this, I have to do administration, I have to do teaching, I have to do research. So, and from another point of view, you see the facilities are open to colleges. Now, whatever facilities is open to me in the department is also accessible to college teachers. So, I agree that it is difficult initially, but what is important, like Professor Vasan has said, that you start a research culture, and this is what I said even in my slide. I think it is important to get into a research culture initially. You might be disappointed at the early stages, you might feel rejections, but you have got molded yourself that yes, then after 5 years you are able to tackle it. I'm not saying immediately as soon as you join at your initial stages you have to do it, but prepare yourself for a research career. And that can be done in many ways. Once you decide you'll do it, you'll find the means also. I cannot say much for the social sciences again, but for the sciences, I can assure you that you will find the facilities, the same facilities that your department will find. I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Rath. The last two questions of this panel discussion, one is a general question, open to everyone, and one is specifically for Professor Mishra. So one of our participants asked to Mishra sir, academic world moving to new generation programs. In this juncture, what will be the future of social science and humanities, especially the rare traditional subjects? So this is one question, sir, which is directed towards you. And one question which is general, which one of our participants, Ms. Jayashri, is asking, it is that how to build non-hierarchical knowledge.
Interrupt?
Yes,
you can
yes.
repeat the question,
Yes.
and let us have Professor Singh
Okay,
to give his views.
Okay. So the question has been, academic world has been moving to new generation programs, and in this juncture, what will be the future of social sciences and humanities, especially the rare traditional subjects?
Professor Singh.
Thank you, Professor Mishra. As long humans are there and they live in a community, social science humanities will be there. Let's keep in mind that there's nothing is going away. In fact, there has to be special effort to protect languages and those disciplines which, because of our failure, remember, it's not natural, it's not the habitat, it's not the milieu, it's our collective enterprise where we are neglecting, say, certain languages, certain community practices, and Professor Sudhavasa knows better. We need to put in special efforts towards that. So, under the onslaught of development and globalization, there's just one pattern which is kind of flowing and being imposed everywhere. That has to be rethought. And, in that sense, remember, we see pandemic has happened. Next 10, 20, 30 years, you'll find people doing research on this. Because what it has shown, our neglect of our habitat, environment, and the way it has gone back. People in philosophical sense have said nature is striking back. So there has to be space and there has to be special measure to protect what you call, some of the rare disciplines or rare areas. But humanities and social sciences will be there. It's bound to be there in whatever way. So what happens in present juncture, most of the universities which are opening and globally, especially if you look at Middle East, they don't have political science department. They're public policy department. But fact is, you cannot do away with politics, and you have to teach philosophy. Means you take up any philosophical tradition, they do address societal concerns. Otherwise, they're not living philosophy, and they keep on changing. Fine. All Indian religious traditions and philosophical traditions have been living traditions. If they are not, fine, they somewhere wither away. So I am assured that humanities and social sciences will have a space. Fine. Maybe this is a time when the regimes all over the world do not find it's so important, but it will survive and it will flourish. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you would allow me to take one last question, Professor Mishra. So I'll take that one last question of the participant, Mr. Karan. He's asking, when research is taught, there is a lot of focus on paper writing. While conducting actual research in the field, it is largely left for research students to learn on their own. So why this gap is there between academic writing and the way students are supposed to learn on their own? Would you like to?
Okay. I think, Shipra, it will be fine if I give my concluding remarks.
Yes, sir.
Right? And I will also try to reflect on the issue which has been raised by our friend. I will first respond to the query which has been put forward for us, that learning on own and writing, how the two go together or how the two are different, and how these emphases are going to create problem. Right? If I have correctly understood the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You see, when we ask students to conduct research, they learn to conduct research and they also do research. These are two important things. So research skill is also important. How to interview, how to write a scientific report which requires providing necessary documentation, and in scientific spirit, particularly empirical approach, the writing should be such that anybody who is interested in replicating your work can do it again. So the method should be given clearly. The way you have analyzed, that should be also there. So it should be transparent. People must know and understand that. So when you study research method, you study how to write, how to conduct, all kinds of analysis, whether it is narrative analysis or case study or interview or doing even experimental research or quantitative, correlational, any kind of research. So it is a disciplined inquiry. So one part is to understand that and to develop that spirit so that you are able to provide understanding, explanation of the phenomena about which you are interested. So that is one part. Now, learning different ways to collect data or to relate to people, I don't think it is contrary to working on own. What are you doing there? You are working on your own, doing what? Interview, ethnography, case study, whatever you are doing, observation. So I don't think there is a conflict between the two. It should be considered as an input to make you confident in doing on your own. So I don't see there is any conflict between the two. I think that it complements. You can't do that unless you understand. And the journey of research is incomplete if you don't write that. And writing is incomplete unless you publish it. And publication should be in peer-reviewed good journals where the college or the community of peers in that discipline are satisfied that you have followed right kind of procedure, right way to interpret, and right way to develop your argument. All those things are part of your learning when you write the paper. So writing the paper, and only then your work will be cited by others, will connect with others' work and become part of the growing sphere of knowledge. This is my observation about our friend's comment or curiosity. Now I would like to conclude because we have already, overstepped. It is 12:42, 43, I see. So I don't think we have to do everything and all the points, because all colleagues have provided very clear input, and I respect all of them. What I have learned is that social sciences and humanities have to reposition themselves. They have to reposition in terms of knowledge creation activity, and there you have to take into account the context, the tradition, the culture, language. I think they are going to enrich us. Many good contributions which are available in sociology, in psychology, in political science, they have linked with our traditions. There are many good theoretical models which are available. Professor Singh hinted at such possibilities. I think it is important because language and thought go together. There are many concepts which cannot be translated, and the translation has created many troubles. One important example is dharma, which is translated as religion, and it's completely wrong translation. Dharma cannot be translated. So the ideas, they are untranslatable. There are many such concepts, and we need to respect them, and we need to see how they contribute. So if you go to those texts, even you go to the conversation in market or in village, there are many such concepts which need to be respected as they are. So it will enrich. So we have to reposition in terms of the various practices that we have in research and in reporting. In terms of publication, I think there is no way out. You need to respect that. And you have to publish globally and you have to publish locally. You need to communicate with people. We need to communicate with the broader community which is available at international level. And a phrase was shared by Professor Vasan that we need to think about research culture. I think all of us think that this research culture has to be unpackaged and repackaged. You need to develop it, and only if proper research culture is developed, where we have physical culture as well as subjective culture, both are included in that. Only then these disciplines can flourish. I just wanted to mention one more thing, that in terms of teaching, many of our colleagues and many of the departments, they stick to a particular course and syllabus, verbatim and comma, full stop, everything. No, this is included and this is not included. So you create a kind of a structure. There is no porous structure between research and teaching. So a research idea may have to wait for years. Only then it will have entry to teaching. What you put in textbooks or what you include in your syllabi, I think there should be more coordination between the two. And that requires continuous change in the process of creation of syllabi. And at times, and we do, at least in my teaching at Delhi University, we had sufficient freedom to what to be taught, what is appropriate. So the same topic which was taught last year may be taught in a different way from other sources if a new source is available. There should not be very hardcore such kind of rule that no, you have to stick to that. Obviously, there are many limitations, but I think it should be more porous. The boundaries between research and teaching, that should be porous. And there should be more connectivity between the two. That is not happening in many places, in many disciplines and many departments. With these remarks, I once again thank Professor Singh for organizing this beautiful interaction, and I thank Shipra for asking us to participate in this program. I look forward to such activities, and they will provide impetus for the growth of the discipline. Thank you very much. Namaskar. आप सबको हार्दिक धन्यवाद.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Mishra, Professor Ujjwal Kumar Singh, Professor Vasan, and Professor Rath. Thank you for such a wonderful discussion. I think it will be appropriate to say that it is quite rare to have such a, such a distinguished panel where different ideas can be discussed and different perspectives and vantage points can be brought into picture. So I'm very sure that the participants have benefited from it. I have myself personally have been enriched from this discussion. So once again, thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining in today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vasan. Thank you.